Hi everyone, welcome to your first asynchronous lecture. I'm gonna try to keep it brief, 10-ish minutes. Today we're gonna talk a little bit about inclusion. On Monday we talked about some of the bare bones foundations of what digital media and digital public relations is. But one of the things that we're gonna find ourselves constantly confronting throughout the semester, and this happens to me every single semester, is removing ourselves and our identities and our social practices from the exercise of delivering digital public relations campaigns. Most of you are digital natives, most of you have smartphones, most of you know how to navigate social media, use digital media, and it can be easy to assume that your experience is universal, that everyone is fluent with TikTok, that everyone knows how to download a podcast, that everyone is comfortable with streaming services, everyone has access to digital media. And that's simply not true. The majority of human beings on this planet don't. And so, although we're going to spend the entire semester unpacking digital media and its relationships to public relations, I'm going to constantly remind you to think about inclusion and other identities. And today is that first conversation to get us engaged. So, let's get started. There's a key reason why we need to have this conversation, and I'm just going to be honest and transparent. As you can see from the text up top, as of right now, the PR industry in the West, the United States, the United Kingdom, is overwhelmingly white. This stat is a couple of years old, but I would guess that it's still over 80%. White people only make up 65% of the population, yet they are overwhelmingly making up the public relations practitioners. And that's not good or bad, but what it means is that if you are a white public relations practitioner, and you're going to do the work of building inclusive campaigns, if you're going to do the work of building out visuals and content and events that bring diverse audiences together, you have to start from a place of inclusion, i.e., this lecture. And if you are not a white public relations practitioner, you're going to be dealing with a majority of audiences in the US who don't look like you. But also, for all of us, our cultural identities, our social identities, our frame of references are just so diverse. So if you're tasked with building a campaign for diverse audiences, then you have to think about those audiences, no matter what social position you have. Let's do it. So, understanding that we all have a different frame of reference, we all have different identities, how do we achieve inclusion in building out digital PR efforts and making our campaigns really diverse? So, think back to the conversation we had on Monday and let's revisit what we called audience analysis. So as you can see above me, the concept is back, which means you want to hold on to it. It's something that you want to keep in your brain, that you're going to constantly revisit throughout the entire semester. And I cannot emphasize this enough. For every single campaign you do, and you're going to do half a dozen, you're going to have to always break down who the audience is, because it's going to drive the intentions behind what you create visually, what you create from a text, and then what type of digital platforms and social media outlets you use. So, real quick, audience analysis, the process of gathering information about people within a subset so you can understand their needs, their expectations, their beliefs, their values, their attitudes, and their likely opinions. So that means that you have to understand who the audience is because they may not look like you, think like you, feel the way that you feel about certain things. And then from that point, you can start to build campaigns. And the driving force behind doing an audience analysis is so that we can all exercise cultural sensitivity. Really quickly, it's the ability of a person to become aware of cultural differences. Now, when we talk about cultural differences, it goes far beyond just gender or race, those demographic characters that we talked about, because not all men think alike, not all gay people think alike, not all Republicans think alike. So, identities is one area that we can consider, especially when it comes to visuals. But when we really want to understand our audiences, we want to exercise sensitivity in the language that we use and the way in which people are represented so that we don't harm the relationships we aim to build, cultivate, and to re engage with. And as you can see, if you take a look over to the side, that there are issues that typically lead to insensitivity. Some of those include, and they are really important, is just a lack of diversity in different settings. So many of you went to high school with people who look just like you. You might have went or attended church with people who look just like you. The people in your family look just like you. Around the holidays, everyone looks the same. Well, if everyone looks the same, there's a lack of diversity. It's easy to exercise insensitivity to people who you've never engaged with because you've never engaged with them. Again, that's not a bad thing. It's just the reality that if you've never been around a trans person, you may not understand what language makes the most sense around trans people because there hasn't been a trans person to tell you. And so, causes of insensitivity have to be noted if we're going to move towards being more sensitive. So, in addition to a lack of diversity, it's a lack of exposure and intention to cultural others, but also groupthink. This idea that everyone thinks exactly the same, so no one's there to counter or push back or play devil's advocate. And that means that the experiences that are being relevant only appeal to those people. And so our goal is to move away from cultural insensitivity and to embrace more of cultural sensitivity. And an audience analysis can help make that happen. Our audience analysis positions us to engage with who different audiences are to understand their attitudes, their beliefs, and their values. And when we do this, we are positioned to exercise more cultural sensitivity because in the wonderful world of digital public relations and building out digital campaigns, we know that our campaigns can be global. So if we want to be successful in global, rich, diverse campaigns, we have to think about global audiences. And surprise, surprise to those of us who are watching, if you think about the globe, the entire world, take a look at on my camera. I have tattoos that are globes and maps everywhere. The global majority happens to not be white people, even though in the US and the UK, the majority of public relations practitioners are white. So there could arguably be a disconnect if we're not thinking about global communities. So I want to throw another concept at you. So in addition to audience analysis, which positions us to understand different audiences' values, attitudes, and beliefs, which in turn increases our cultural sensitivity, I want to give you this new word, cultural competence. So, cultural competence is a range of cognitive, affective, and behavioral skills that leads each of us to effectively and appropriately communicate with different persons. This is important in public relations, but also in just general society. In America, we tend to not value cultural competency. We don't. In a lot of other countries, people learn different languages. They travel and go to different locations. And not everyone exercises cultural competencies, but in the grand scheme of things, in America, we are pretty far down the totem pole. We have this nationalism, this America or die mentality, which means that we tend to vilify cultural others, which means that we lack competency in understanding others and their experiences. I absolutely want you in a space like this to be open to and excited about embracing what it looks like to become competent about other people's cultural practices, their different identities. Just take, for example, here in the US, we tend to shake hands. But if you go to an Asian country, they tend to bow. If you were to go to some European countries like Italy, they tend to kiss on the cheek. Just understanding different ways of greeting one another in different cultural spaces increases our cultural competencies. So you can imagine how valuable that could be if your job is to build relationships between diverse audiences and your client. So, in the same vein that we're going to exercise more cultural sensitivity, with the goal of becoming more cultural competent, we have to understand that not all groups, even though they have the same culture or the same practices or even the same identities, being black or democratic or trans or conservative, that they're not homogenous, meaning that just because they all look the same and have the same identity doesn't mean that they think and feel and value the same things. People are intersectional and they're layered, hence the audience analysis of it all. So I want to give you this term because I want you to hold on to it because different individuals will understand the same ideas in different ways. Sometimes you will go out with your friend and you will say, I gotta show you this TikTok, it's so funny. And then you play them the TikTok and they don't laugh at all. They just didn't find it funny. It happens to me and my partner all the time. Yeah, you have some similar identities. You're in the same age group. You may have the same political affiliation. You may be the same sexual orientation. You may be from the same geographic location. But what you find funny is different. What you find impactful is indifferent. What taps into your emotions may be different. That's why the audience analysis is so nuanced. We can't just assume that because everyone looks alike, they also think alike and they feel the same way. We have to walk in with a fresh, clean slate. And so this is one way to do that. Another is frame of reference, which you've heard before, and it's how I'll wrap up this lecture. All right, my friends, we are tiptoeing towards the end. One more concept I want to give you in this lecture on inclusion, and that is frame of reference. That's that unique set of perspectives, experiences, knowledges, and values that each individual holds, and they hold them dear. And oftentimes, our frame of reference drives how we behave and act towards one another. It's how we look at situations and circumstances. It's what drives our emotions. And so everyone's different. Everyone has a different identity. They have layered identities. They have different frame of references. And the more we get to know them, the more we can exercise cultural sensitivity. The more we get to know them, the more we become culturally competent. And in the wonderful world of public relations, the better we can assess who audiences and stakeholders are and deliver appropriate messages to build rich, impactful relationships between those groups and our clients. So hold on to these concepts. They're in bold, so you do want to make sure you have them with you. And now it's time to get ready for your quiz. You have 10 questions, multiple choice, true, false, based off of the readings from the syllabus and in Brightspace and this lecture. The quiz is open notes, so all the notes you took from this video, you can reference. The readings, you can open them up and have them available. But I really, really, really want to emphasize that once you start the quiz, you cannot stop. So it can stay on, but it's timed. And you only get one attempt. So take your notes, watch the video, and then as you go in, think through the concepts and terms and how they're applicable. Best of luck, and I will see all of you on Monday.